This is a previous podcast replay. What's your hiring process? Episode 267. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Profit with Law. I am your host, Moshe Amsel, and I am excited to talk to you about team building, in particular if you're seeking to bring on another staff member to your firm, or if you're questioning what you could have done in the past differently than what you did to filter your staff members better. So this episode is completely about the hiring process, and for some of it I'm going to keep on the periphery. I'm just going to touch on certain points, and for some of it I'm going to go a little bit deeper. The purpose of this episode is not to dive into any of these specific pieces of the process specifically, but really to discuss the process itself, why it's necessary to have a process, and what are some of the things that I do in hiring staff for my own company that you can learn from and take parts of it that you like and implement into your law firm. So it's best if I start with what is the need for a process. Why have a process in the first place around hiring for your firm, especially if you don't hire very frequently. So if you're a solo and you've never hired before and you're considering your first hire, or if you're a small firm where your hiring only happens not because of growth, but because of turnover, and therefore you may not need this process today. So the purpose of the hiring process is to kind of eliminate the possibility or reduce the risk of making the wrong hire. When you hire the wrong person, it is extremely costly for your firm. And at the first, knee-jerk reaction to what I just said, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm going to have to take the time, energy, and effort to go through the hiring process with another person. But it's way more than that, because if you think about it, in the hiring process, if you hire the wrong person, they now join your firm, and they're in your firm for X amount of time until you figure out that they're the wrong hire. And even when you figure it out that they're the wrong hire, you're not going to be so quick to fire them. So essentially, you're getting subpar work, or work that is not driving you in the right direction, or they're performing for you and they're a rock star and then they fizzle out. So you thought that you had a good hire and they performed well for a period of time, but then they fizzled, which is the worst kind of situation, because then you're constantly thinking that they're going to improve, they're going to get better, it's going to go back to the way it was, and you end up carrying that employee for far longer than you should have. And when you're a small firm, these employees that were hired incorrectly or were bad placements, they could be the difference between your firm growing, between your firm being profitable and not. And this is huge. And I apologize, by the way, I'm suffering from allergies right now, so if there's some sniffles in the background, that's just the time of year, so you're going to have it on the next few episodes, and really sorry for that. So the wrong hire can be costly for your firm. And if you create a process around the hiring that you do, what you're doing is you're creating unity in how you filter through the candidates and bring somebody onto your firm. And by doing so, what it does is it eliminates some of the errors that might happen just from forgetting to check one of the boxes. And that can happen. If you don't have a straightforward written process that you follow, you might do something differently with one candidate, or you might do something differently with one position you're filling. And by skipping that step, you might end up bringing on the wrong hire. So become very clear in your process. And the best time to sit down and go through this process is when you're not actively hiring somebody. Because when you're not actively hiring somebody, there is no pressure to skip steps and to eliminate pieces. And you can really think through about, how do I want to make this happen? And by doing that, you become really clear on where you should focus your efforts, what steps you should take, and you can really crystallize what that process is. So even if you're not currently actively looking to hire somebody, this podcast is important because this is probably the right time for you to spend some time on creating this process and really formalizing what it is. Now, what is the hiring process? In other words, what is the purpose of creating a process? And we already said that if you hire the wrong person, it can be costly to your firm. But what are you trying to accomplish in the process that you take to take somebody through this hiring process? And the answer is that it's a filtration process. Basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to funnel candidates through a filter that is going to eliminate the people who don't fit criteria. So at the beginning, we cast a filter that is going to catch as many of the bad candidates as possible up front and eliminate them, so that we're not expending or wasting resources communicating with them and putting them through what could be a costly thing for your firm because they're not a good candidate to begin with. And I'm going to go through some of the things you can do, and I'll demonstrate how this gets filtered and how you eliminate candidates in this manner. But the hiring process is a filtration system to eliminate bad candidates, to eliminate poorly aligned candidates, so that when you're done, you're left with the last candidate standing. And the last candidate standing at that point should be the best candidates for your firm for that position. And actually, what I've learned is that you want to have at least 2 and hopefully 3 really, really good, solid candidates that have made it to the end of the process, so that you can choose from those 2 or 3 candidates. Now, why should you be left with 2 or 3 good ones? Isn't the point of the entire process to end up with 1? The answer is because if you end up with just 1 person who has made it through the entire process and gotten to the end, you're going to, at that point, it's exciting, right? So you've got somebody who's now checked all the boxes and they seem like the perfect person for your firm. And what happens is, if you have that perfect person, you're going to overlook anything negative that you've felt or discovered in this process because of all the positive check boxes that they've checked. And when you have more than one option in front of you, it's easier to not gloss over those flaws that you see in the candidate and kind of write them off or circumvent them without even realizing that that's what you're doing. So let's talk about one more thing, and that is, when you're going through this process, you're creating this filter, and I mentioned this briefly, but I didn't hone in on it. What you're trying to do is you're trying to determine if the person is the right fit for your firm, and if they're if they belong in the right seat that you're hiring for. So here's what I mean. Your firm has a culture, and whether you've focused on creating a culture intentionally or not, you have a culture for your firm. And there are people who will thrive in that culture, and you have a direction you're pulling, you have a mission that you're following, and there are people who will do great aiming towards that end goal and following that mission and holding that torch for you. And then there are people who won't be aligned with that, and they just won't resonate with it, and therefore they're not going to be pulling in the same direction as you when it comes to carrying the torch for your firm. So that's the right fit for the organization. You need people who are going to fit in the firm. And then you need to find people who are the right candidates for the position being filled. And this is not so much about experience as it is about the ability to do the job, having the right wiring of their personality and the way that they think and the way that they tackle jobs to be able to be in the position that is going to require them to do things a certain way, make decisions a certain way, and so on and so forth. So there's two different criteria that we're trying to check off the boxes for. Are they the right fit for the organization? And are they in the right seat? Are they sitting down in the correct seat in my firm? So they might be perfect for my organization, but they're just the job I'm hiring for is a paralegal, and they would be a better fit for a receptionist or an office manager. And if I don't have that position available, then I can't hire them at this point because they're not the right seat for what I'm trying to fill. So before we even start to formulate the hiring process, it's important to cover a few things. And they are as follows. First of all, what is important to you as you build your firm? And I kind of mentioned this in talking about the right fit for the organization, that you should have a general mission that you're after. You should have a general direction that you're trying to take the firm. And that it's important to identify what that is. What's important to you when you're building your firm. And it's not necessarily just the mission. It could be anything. It could be the work environment. It could be, if you want to have a law firm where people are playing foosball on lunch, then it's important to you that you are building a firm that's all around fun and enjoying your time in the office. Whereas if you're building a firm where you want to be 100% professional and everybody's coming in a suit and tie, and on lunch breaks they're meeting with clients, then that's a completely different type of firm that you're building. And it's important to know what it is that you're building, because that is going to dictate how you attract the people that you want to attract. So that leads us right into the next one, which is, who are you trying to attract? And this is along the same lines. Are you trying to attract somebody who is interested in having fun and being and having an exciting environment? Or are you interested in attracting somebody who's very serious and takes the world seriously and doesn't know how to crack a smile? That leads straight from the previous question. Then that goes into the broader picture of what is the culture that you're trying to create. And these are all questions that are basically, they're the same thing, but brought from different angles. And the intention is that you want to get really clear on what you're trying to achieve and who you're trying to attract, so that you get the right people applying for the job. This is even before you create the process. You want to get clear on this, because you want to make sure the people who even raise their hand and say, hey, I want a job at your firm, are excited about your firm before they even start. And finally, what type of people will advance the culture of the firm, the mission of the firm, and the face of your firm? If you can get clear on identifying what type of people those are, then that will help you extremely in the process. So what's in a process? Let's jump right into this, and let's just get into the technical details of the process itself. The first thing is that we start with the job posting. When you post the job posting, that is the first touch that a potential candidate has with your firm. When they read that job posting, they should be able to tell from the job posting whether this is a firm they want to work for. So it's important that you do a good job in the text of the ad, in the way that it's written, that it is written to attract the right people and repel the wrong ones. Go back to the example we had before. Let's say that you're trying to build a firm where the culture is fun and exciting and and laid back. Then you want to make sure that the text of your ad is written in a fun way, that it cracks jokes, or it talks about the enjoyment of a fun working environment and so on, to get the people who are interested in that to respond to that ad. Whereas if you are looking for a very professional and tightly run environment, then you want to make sure that your ad is completely buttoned up and really reads as a very professional type firm, so that when somebody's reading it, if they're looking for fun and freedom and relaxation at the job, then they're not trying to apply for your job. They're going to look at it and say, this is not for me. Now, in the job posting is the very first place that we have one of these filters. And this is the big filter that is going to eliminate 90% of your candidates. And it's huge. You absolutely have to do this. And here's why. What I do in the job posting is I give very specific instructions of how to apply for the job. So let's say that you post the job, and I'm just going to use some regular job sites. There are specific ones for law firms, but let's just say that you use Indeed.com or you use ZipRecruiter, or one of those large job posting sites. When you post your job on there, the typical way that somebody would apply for it is they would click the apply button. They already have their profile saved, they have their resume stored, and they click the apply button, and in just a second, they apply for your job and they move on to the next thing. What people who are looking for a job do is they'll look for the job title that they want, and they'll just go down the list and they'll click apply, 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 apply. Now, what happens in that process is that you're getting people who have not even read your job posting. They don't care about whether your firm is the right firm. All they care about is getting a job. Is that who you want working in your firm? Do you want to have somebody who could care less about your firm and all they're interested in is a job? I'm guessing the answer is no. And if the answer is no, then the first place that you can eliminate most of the people applying for the job is by simply putting into the job posting, into the text of your job posting, a different way to apply. So here's what I do. What I do is, what I did in the past was I had them send an email with a specific subject line and then specific information in the email letting us know that they were applying for the job. In the last time that I went through the hiring process, which I'm actually currently in the middle of hiring somebody on my staff, and what we did this time around is we implemented a Google survey form. And what that did is it allowed us to unify the questions that were being asked, and it made it less confusing to the candidate. In a way, I was afraid to do that because I wanted to really see their responses and so on, but it made it less confusing to the candidate, and therefore it gave us the responses in an organized fashion that we can easily run with and go with and follow the process. So what we did was we implemented a Google form, but then we also had instructions on the form for them to do one other thing, to take a Myers-Briggs personality test and then send us a screenshot of the results of that test in an email. So not only are they filling out the form, but they're also emailing us an email with an attachment. Now, only people who followed those instructions actually got to the next step. So what happened is we got, I think to date, we've had over 500 applicants apply on the various job sites for this job. Of those 500 applicants, there are less than 20 that actually went to the Google survey form and filled it out and got to the point where we picked up the phone and called them. So that just is it's a huge eye-opener to the fact that this is a powerful tool to eliminate people who are just out there for a job and not interested specifically in what your firm has to offer. Now, yes, you can argue that you might be losing a good candidate in this process. That may very well be. However, I would counter and argue that the right candidate for your firm is somebody who is going to be detail-oriented enough to at least care to read the job post and see what the job is about before applying for it. So it says a lot about the person and how little they care about what they're doing to just click the apply button without reading the text of what they're applying for. So that's the first filter that can be done right in the job posting, and that's the first part of the process. Now, once somebody has applied properly for the job, then at that point, you can have their first touch point with the firm. Now, my recommendation is that the first touch point not be you, unless you're the only one there, and that the first touch point is done by a staff member. And what I do here internally is we have a number of pre-canned questions that the person on staff is asking, and then we have a grading scale with a numbering system for each question where they put in the response, and then B, they grade them on certain things like creativity, clarity. Did they speak loudly enough? Were you able to hear them? Did they communicate clearly enough to be able to understand what they were saying? Things like that are like basic tests that anybody can do that does not require any specific skills, but eliminates people who simply wouldn't be able to communicate with my clients, or I wouldn't be able to communicate with my staff member, or they wouldn't follow directions, or one of the questions that we ask is so their answer is so off the wall that it tells us, hey, stay away from this person. So it's important to protect your time in this process, and that's why I think it's important that the first touch point be somebody on your staff. There's phone calls to make, there's information to gather, and you want to make sure that the person you're getting on the phone with has at least met that criteria. So once again, this is another filter that's going to eliminate some candidates. So we had less than 20 candidates who applied for the position properly, and then we had only about a dozen or so we eliminated probably 5 or 6 of them in this initial process with the phone calls, where we didn't even have to get on an interview with them. So from here, I'm going to share with you what I do in my process. Now, you have to develop the process that works for you. The reason I'm sharing my process with you is because over time, with the various experiences that I've had in hiring people and filtering candidates out and making wrong hires and living with those bad decisions, I've come up with a process that's very well thought out for me. It is a longer process than the typical company would have in their HR process, but at the same time, it does a really, really good job of vetting and eliminating the people who I don't want. And at the same time, it does a really good job of getting somebody who is a right candidate, getting them really excited about the prospect of working with us. And that's what you want to have this do. You don't want it to just be drudgery for them. You want it to build up the excitement and anticipation of working for your firm for the person who is the perfect candidate and the perfect fit for your firm. So in my process, we start with the job posting, then we do the application process, then we have the initial phone call from my staff. From that point, we then schedule a video conference interview, and that video conference interview is with the direct manager that they will be reporting to. So in this case, right now, I happen to be hiring an executive assistant for me personally, so the video conference was being done by me. And when I do the interview, I have a list of questions that I ask. And early on in the interview, I give them the opportunity to ask me any questions. I also take the opportunity during that point to tell them how extensive our hiring process is, so that if they don't want to go through that process, they can raise their hand and opt out. And believe it or not, I've had somebody do that. So you would think that if somebody wants the job badly enough, they're willing to jump through a few hoops to get the job. Well, my executive assistant position is a part-time position. And one of my candidates, when I shared with them that they will have to go through a couple of personality assessments and a couple of in-person interviews and a mini project, which I'm going to share all of that with you in a moment, when I shared that with them, they were like, this is a part-time job I'm applying for. I'm not interested in doing all of that. And that was perfect because, once again, filtered them out. And honestly, I'm looking for somebody who wants part-time right now. But if, as we grow and as my needs for that person increases, or as what they do in the company increases, their responsibility increases, that they can go from part-time to full-time. So I'm interested in somebody who's looking at my company as, this is the mission that they're after, and this is really aligned with what I want to do, and I'm excited about that, and I want to do whatever it takes to become a part of that company. So the video conference interview, there's a series of questions that I ask, and I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but one question that I will share with you is I ask them, why do you want this job? This is a powerful question. And the reason it's powerful is because people will give you all kinds of answers, but sometimes they're going to answer why they want to work for your firm. Sometimes they're going to answer why they want to be, let's say it's a paralegal, why they want to be a paralegal. And you need to then redirect them to the question. The question is, why do you want this job? Not why do you want to work as a paralegal, but why do you want to work as a paralegal for my firm? If they answer why they want to work for your firm, then you redirect them. Okay, I got it. You want to work for a firm that's fun, that's exciting. You want to work for a firm that has this and this mission and goal. You want to work for a firm that's this size. You want to have growth potential. Great. But why do you want this role in this firm? And getting the answer to that question is going to be an eye-opener to you as far as how well aligned is this candidate with you and your mission and your culture and your firm that you're trying to build, and how excited are they about it. So when they answer this question, they bring a lot of that to the table, and that's a real eye-opener for you. Once we've completed the video conference interview, if I now think that we're going to carry them to the next step, the next step would be an in-person interview. So I add a couple of filters before that. So before we do an in-person interview, and the sequence of events can change. So we do a Kolbe assessment, Kolbe A, and that costs us $55 a pop. So you may want to meet them in person first and then do the Kolbe A assessment. But honestly, for me, it's well worth the $55 if it means that we're going to eliminate a candidate. So we do two assessments. We do a Kolbe A assessment and we do a core values exercise, and we do these before the in-person interview. The Kolbe A assessment is very interesting. It's not a personality test. It's actually testing their ability to, or not their ability, but it's testing how they go about their decision-making process and how they go about tackling jobs and projects and things like that. And what's interesting about the Kolbe assessment is the manager, the direct reporting manager, takes the Kolbe A, the prospect takes the Kolbe A, and then the manager takes a Kolbe C. The Kolbe C is a test specifically asking questions about the position that you're looking to fill. Then the Kolbe company gives you a right fit assessment for that candidate based on how they scored compared to the manager and the position that's open. And you want a certain letter grade range in order for them to be a good candidate. Now, here's the key. If they're outside that range, they should be a no-go. That should be a point where you stop, because this is proven with years and years of data and countless stories that I've heard from mentors and other business owners of when they thought they knew better than this assessment and they went and hired anyway. They ended up hiring either the right person for the wrong seat, or they ended up hiring the wrong seat for the right seat, wrong person, or they were completely off. And so they either needed to move that person into a different position, or they had to fire the person. And they did nobody any favors by circumventing this process. The core values exercise is more to make sure that their core values align with yours and your firm's. They don't need to match all of them, so I have them provide their top 5 core values, and the top 5 we're looking for a match of a minimum of 2 and hopefully 3 or more. And they're not going to be perfect, so you'll see. We'll link up a link in the show notes, which can be found at profitwithlaw.com/034. So we'll link that up in the show notes. where you can click through and read a blog post on the core value exercise and how to go about administering that. But as long as the core value is within the same vein or category, so for example, if my core value number 1 is family and their core value number 1 is love, those are the same core value. They're said different ways, but they're really the same core value. So we want to make sure that we have at least 2 or 3 core values that align if we're going to bring somebody on. If none of the core values are a match, that's an instant no as well. Again, another filter, another way of taking out a candidate who's just not the right fit for your organization. So these 2 assessments, one is checking to see if they're a good fit with the organization. The other is checking to see if they're a good fit for the position. Then, once we've cleared them through the Kolbe and through the core values exercise, we then go and do an in-person interview. Now, the in-person interview, the purpose is to assess their personality and compatibility. I don't do any skills questions during that interview. It's simply a conversation, see how at ease they are, see how they, are we able to get along? Do we resonate with each other? Is there a match personality-wise to be able to work together in the future? Once that interview is done, if I have a good feeling, then what I do is I assign a mini project or a task for them to complete. The purpose of that is to assess their skills, assess their ability to follow instructions, to complete it on time. I provide a due date. They have to complete it on time, and how they present it to me. That all is very telling in what their work is going to look like once they're working for me. And then finally, I then do a second in-person interview, and personally, I bring my spouse to the interview. It's an outside perspective. It's another person who I know is going to have my best interest at heart, and she's a good judge of character. And the purpose of bringing her is to get her opinion on the character of the person that I am meeting with. And again, the second interview is casual, conversational, and just looking to see what happens is that the second time they get a little more comfortable. They might let their guard down. And I'm looking for quirks that are red flags to be like, oh, you're letting your true personality come out, and this is not a personality that I really am very excited about. So that's basically my hiring process. Now, some of the filters that I use, some of them I already explained, and some I'm just going to summarize real quick. So the ability to follow directions is really important. Then when we're meeting in person and through video conference, punctuality is very important. Another thing. So for the position that I'm filling right now, when we reached out to candidates and called them on the phone, if we reached somebody who had a voicemail that was full, that we eliminated them, because an executive assistant should be super organized. If your voicemail is full to the point where you're not emptying your voicemail box, then what's going to happen when you're monitoring my email box or when you're monitoring my voicemail, right? So you have to think about stuff like that should be an easy determination based on what you're looking for in that position to see these signs that the person might not be the right person. But so I'm looking for punctuality to interviews and meetings. We're looking for Kolbe and core values alignment. I'm looking for whether or not they sent me a thank you note after doing an interview with them. I'm looking for, so A players, if I'm looking for an A players interview the employer before they're willing to take a job with you. So they're also interviewing me. So I actually have in my process, I'll ask them a question like, when you viewed my social media profile, is there anything that you saw that stood out to you as exceptional, or is there anything that you saw that you would recommend that I change? And what that question is really doing is checking to see, did you view my social media profile? Have you checked me out? Another question I ask, which you might not be able to ask if you're not a podcast host, but we make sure that in one of our email communications with them, there's an intro saying who the owner is, who Moshe Amsel is, and it says I'm a podcast host of a show called Profit with Law. We give them the information they need, that if they want to check me out, they will. So I then ask, when you listen to my show, what did you learn? Tell me one thing that you learned when listening to my show. if they didn't listen to my show, that's very telling to me that they're not an A player. Now, it's not an automatic filter out, but those are two big ones. A thank you note and A players interviewing me are big ones. Now, another thing you can do, I do my first interview in a coffee shop, and I'm looking to see, are they going to reach out to my assistant and ask me how I like my ask her how I like my coffee, and are they going to be there early and buy me a cup, or am I walking in and buying them coffee? Now, I'm very happy to buy them coffee. That's not the issue. I'm not looking to be treated, but I am looking to see if they are taking the initiative to try to up their game and stand out. And then finally, why do they want the job, and what's their long game? Like, those are the big questions that I'm trying to find out in the interview process. The biggest takeaway for me in the hiring process is I'm not hiring for skills. I'm hiring for personality. Skills can always be taught. Now, obviously, if you're filling a position for an attorney, you need to have an attorney. If you're filling a position for an attorney that needs to be able to do certain things, you need to have an attorney that needs to be able to do certain things. Paralegal, same idea. So there are certain skills that are going to be required for the job, depending on the job. So you'll have to be the judge of that. But the primary focus for me is this the right fit for the company and for the seat? And then everything else from there can be taught, can be learned, can be improved, and so on. So I hope this is helpful. Again, it's really important to create the process, write the process, and become clear on what it is. And then you can take the process and implement it every single time that you're ready to make a hire. So I hope this is helpful, and have a wonderful day. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.